Good morning. It's Saturday morning and I woke up and I saw that it snowed today, so check out all the snow. Oh, it's actually started snowing again as I'm making this, as I just said this. Look at that. It's snowing. Cool, my car's all snowed in and it's kind of cool, huh? It just started dumping it as I started filming. I used to live in a city with 2 million people in it and I was surrounded by all these people. Now I am living in a farm where the closest creatures to me are these sheep. Look at that. Guys, when I recently became a British citizen, it took me 2 years. I made some mistakes along the way that I didn't necessarily have to make. So I want to make a video to help people who are going through the same process and help you avoid making the same mistakes that I made. So first of all, there are slightly different ways of becoming a US citizen depending on where you're from or how you're going to do it. So first of all, I'm going to divide the applicants between the EU and non-EU because it makes a slight difference. So if you're living in the EU at the moment, you can come to the UK and settle and work and study and live without any restrictions whatsoever. Now, I know this might change because of Brexit, and no one really knows what will happen after Brexit is implemented. My personal prediction is that people will still be able to come here relatively easily and settle relatively easily. If hard Brexit happens, I believe people will still be able to come and visit without any restrictions, and they will be able to apply for jobs. But if they want to become permanent residents and work for UK and work in the UK, they may then have to apply for some sort of a permit. And if they have a job offer, they will probably be given a permit. That's probably the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is that people from the EU countries will still be able to come and work here without a visa. Just as is the case with Switzerland and Norway. Neither Switzerland or Norway are in the EU, and any British person or any Polish person or any German person can work in Norway and in Switzerland because of the EEA. So it's not just the EU, there are other organizations that allow exchange of workers. So that aside, if you're a EU citizen, the basic requirement to become a British citizen is that you need to come and live here for 5 years continuously. During those 5 years, there are a few rules for you to observe. You need to spend no more than 450 days outside of the UK during those 5 years altogether. During the last 12 months of your residency, you are not allowed to spend more than 90 days outside of the UK. So if you decided to go away for 4 months during the last year of your 5-year residency period, you will not get citizenship. One basic rule for everyone who wants to apply for UK citizenship is please save all the paperwork from the first day that you arrive. So any bank statements, any electricity bills, any letters from your local council, any P60s or P45s every time you get a job, anything official, bank statements, save everything. Don't throw anything away because those documents will later be required to prove that you've been a resident. So many people don't have those documents or are missing some of them. Just save everything. And once you become a citizen, you can throw everything away if you want to. So after you've lived in the UK for 5 years, you apply for permanent residency. Now for EU citizens, the permanent residency is automatic. So after 5 years, you automatically get permanent residency. That doesn't mean that they send you anything in the post that you get a permanent residency card or a green card. No, you have to officially apply to get something, to get an official recognition of your permanent residency, even though in theory you have it, but you don't have anything practical to prove it. So I still recommend applying for it. I did, and I've actually been here a lot longer than 5 years, but I did apply for one just to have a peace of mind. After about 9 years of being here, I applied for permanent residency, and you get this little booklet. I don't know how well you can see it. The actual residency is there. I'm just gonna cover my name up. So you get this little green card, and that entitles you to reside in the UK indefinitely. This is also called an ILR, which stands for indefinite leave to remain. Now, this is for EU citizens. Remember, if you're from India or Pakistan, or if you're from America or Canada, your ILR will look differently. You will get more like a driving license type of a card, more like an actual green card. This is different. You will not get this. After you've had this document for a year, for 12 months, then you can apply for your British citizenship. So in theory, it takes 6 years to get your British citizenship. It takes 6 years before you can start the application. So first 5 years is waiting to get your permanent residency. Once you become a permanent resident, you need to wait a year, and then you can apply for your UK citizenship. Okay, if you're from the EU and you're a student in the UK, a full-time student, those years will count towards your residency, but you need to be very, very careful. You need to document that you need to have paperwork from your university, what course you studied, when you graduated. You need to provide proof that you have been able to support yourself, that you're not going to be a burden for the country. So they might ask for your financial history. How have you been supporting yourself? If you were on a scholarship, you need to provide that scholarship. If you had your own money, they will ask for your bank statements. Most importantly, and this trips up a lot of people, if you were a full-time EU student in the UK for 4 years, they will ask for your health insurance. So you need to have had some sort of a medical private insurance, because they don't want you to be a burden on the NHS. And even though you are entitled to NHS treatment, because anyone in the UK can pretty much go into the NHS and use it, officially they want you to have private insurance. And if you don't have private insurance, if you've never had it during your 4 years of being a student, then your application will be rejected. And this is what tripped me up. So I applied for my citizenship, and fortunately I was a part-time student, and I was also working. So if you're a part-time student and you're working, then you don't need this medical insurance, because if you're a worker, if you work more than, I don't know, 16 hours a week, then your employer is insuring you automatically. You get some sort of an insurance from your workplace. And if you work, I was actually working full-time and studying part-time. I was working my ass off, yes I was. So during those 4 years, I actually was a full-time worker. So I shouldn't have told the immigration that I was a student at all. I thought being a student would improve my chances. It didn't. It made it worse, because they started asking for all this evidence from when I was a student. Oh, tell us about your medical insurance, otherwise we're going to reject your application. You know, who are you insured with? And I was like, shit, I wasn't insured with anybody. I was just living here. But because I was working full-time, I actually said, wait a minute, forget that I was a student. I was here as a worker, because what they want to see is that for those 5 years you exercised your the EU treaty rights, the treaty on exchange of workers. You need to have exercised those rights. So even as a student, you can still exercise those rights, but if you're a student, as I said, you need insurance. But because I was also working, then I changed the basis of my application, and I said I'm actually applying as a worker, not as a student. I've exercised those rights as a worker, and that got me off the hook, and my application was successful. But you need to be very careful with that. If you count your student years during your application, and do more research, don't just rely on my video. Okay, so if you're non-EU, and you're a student, your student years will not count towards your residency. So you need to stay here on a work visa and then work here for another 5 years. And only those 5 years will count. Then you need to stay for an additional 6th year as a permanent resident with your ILR, and then you can apply for citizenship. So if you're non-EU and you come here as a student, it might take you 10 years to get your UK citizenship. If you're non-EU and you come here for work, and you manage to work here legally with visas for 5 years, then you can get your permanent residency. And then wait a year and apply for UK citizenship, so it can still take you only 6 years if you're non-EU, provided you don't come here as a student, but you come here as a worker, as a legal worker. The exception from the 6-year rule is if you are married to a UK citizen. Then things are a lot easier. All you need to do is just prove that the marriage is genuine. They will ask for evidence that you're living together, that you maybe have a joint bank account, that it's a genuine marriage, not a fake marriage. If it's a genuine marriage, then you can apply. You will probably get your citizenship after 3 years. So after 3 years, you get your permanent residency card, and then you don't have to wait this extra year. You can apply after 3. Okay, so I know that there are some countries like India, major big countries, that do not allow dual citizenship. So if you're an Indian and you want to become a UK citizen, you need to be prepared to say goodbye to your Indian passport. And the irony is that I know some Indians who have become UK citizens, and now when they want to go to India, they need to get a visa to go to the country that they only left like 6 or 7 years ago. So it's kind of funny that way, but most countries allow dual citizenship, so you shouldn't have a problem with that. I know it's a little funny with South Africa. I've spoken with South Africans who became Brits, and I think if you're South African, you need to go on your country's government website and let them know and make sure that you pay money to keep your South African citizenship. That's what I heard. So if you're South African, just double check that you don't lose your South African passport. Okay, and another important thing, once you meet those criteria, you need to take the Life in the UK test. So this is probably, for me, it was the easiest and the most enjoyable step. I love taking tests. So I passed the test really quickly. I studied a little bit from this book, but if you just study from that book, you can buy it on Amazon. You can buy a second-hand copy for really cheap on Amazon. Life in the UK Citizenship Test. You will pass the test. It's a fun test, and it just asks you questions about some very basic history. It might ask you about Henry VIII, or it might actually ask you about Queen Elizabeth. It might ask you about the Scottish national dish. It might ask you about what languages are spoken in Wales. It might ask you about the English Civil War. So just some really basic facts about UK history, UK present life, and maybe even sports. It might ask you about who Mo Farah is. So if you don't know those things, then maybe you should get yourself a little more familiar with the British and the British life and basic British history. Once you pass the test is good for life, so it doesn't expire. If you fail the test, you just keep retaking it. It costs £50 to take the test. So, the whole application costs a little bit of money. So when I applied for my UK citizenship, my application fee was about £935. Now, I'm just looking it up. Now it's £1,236. So yeah, then you got to pay for the test. So altogether, for pictures, altogether it might cost you about £1,400 to get your application across to the Home Office. Another thing to be wary is the time it takes. Mine took forever, and as I said, it took forever because I was rejected initially. As I said earlier, my application was initially rejected because of this misunderstanding about me being a student and me applying on the basis that my residency years included my student years, and they did. It took another 6 months to clear that up. So altogether, my application took almost 2 years because, believe it or not, I also went to my local MP's office and I thought I would get some help on my application, and it was the opposite. They really messed things up for me. They actually lost my application, and I had to wait another 6 months to make a new application without making the new fee to continue on my old application. But I had to gather more evidence because they lost a lot of paperwork. So yeah, if you're gonna go to your local MP's office to get help, be very careful. They don't really care They're like socialists, especially if your MP is Labour. They don't really care. They work on the basis they just come into the office, you know, take a few boxes. They don't really care about you. The experience that I had with my MP's office is absolutely horrible. I do not recommend it. That's why I don't believe in socialism. That's why I believe in individualism and private enterprise, because if something is yours, you care about it. Or you can also hire a lawyer if you have a little more money. If you have a little money, I would recommend hiring an attorney or hiring a solicitor to help you with the application. If you have any more questions for me regarding the process that I didn't cover in this video, just ask me in the comment section and I will definitely answer that. Thanks for watching as usual, and see you guys in the next video.